Hey guys, it's Graham. What's cracking? In 2009, the final book written and scheduled for publication by Michael Crichton before his death came out, called Pirate Latitudes. This is an example of historical fiction that is much more historical and much less fiction, kind of to its detriment. I was looking forward to this book for a long time, and then when I finally read it, even at the time, even in my most open-minded, least critical, least cynical years as a reader, I gave that one 3 stars. And even after a rereading, I more or less stand by that assessment. Why is that? Well, this book, because of when it came out, couldn't help but be, even if unfairly, compared to Pirates of the Caribbean. It was scheduled for release in '08, in December of '08 actually, but in November of '08, Crichton died of cancer. And so the book was postponed so the family and the estate could grieve and all that. And then when it came out in '09, by that point, the next Pirates of the Caribbean movie had been announced, On Stranger Tides. When I ordered my copy of Pirate Latitudes, it came in the same Amazon package as a paperback of On Stranger Tides and Monster Hunter International from Larry Correia. So 2/3 of that package was pirate books. I read those while I was recovering from an accident where I did something stupid on a motorbike. And as a result, couldn't really do a whole lot, couldn't work out, couldn't go anywhere besides work in my apartment for about 6 weeks, until my shoulder healed up. But I digress. The premise of the novel is that it's set in 1665. There's the main character is a guy named Charles Hunter. He is a sailor, and he's hired by the governor of Port Royal, Jamaica, a guy named Almont, to go and raid a Spanish galleon that they know is nearby and bring all of its treasure back. And he'll be filthy rich if he does this. The only difference between privateering and piracy is that one has the sanction of the state and the other does not. Like that's basically it. And while he's out doing privateering stuff, political machinations carry out in Jamaica, and by the time he comes back, he's put on trial for piracy and sentenced to hang. The benefits of this book, like the main upsides of this book, are that it shows what the world was like back then. The downside is that it doesn't give you a whole lot to enjoy or appreciate. Michael Crichton uses the 5 senses in Pirate Latitudes very thoroughly, and it paints a picture of a pretty disgusting world. I still remember the opening chapter of the book where the governor wakes up and he's getting ready for the day, and he's all old and fat and sick, and he's using worm guts to brush his teeth or something. And I'm sure that I'm misremembering that. I know that worm guts was part of his collection of tinctures and stuff that he used to get ready, but it made it feel gross. Wow, this is this dude's morning routine. It's pretty nasty. And then he goes and watches a hanging of a criminal, and the criminal wets himself while he's dangling from the rope. It's oh, fantastic. Okay, you got me thinking about all kinds of gross stuff. And then he's got to survey the recent shipment of potential farmers' wives that have been sent to the colony. Really, it was just Britain getting rid of their funky English-teethed criminal women. And even the governor's yeah, none of these chicks are going to be farmers' wives, except for the cute one who's 15. And so the governor pulls her aside, and they do the hibbity-dibbity later that night, and it's nasty 17th century unprotected hibbity-dibbity. So the whole thing, you read this book and it just makes you feel sticky and you smell bad. It's oh, gross. But through his conversations with this woman, he finds out that the Spanish galleon is sailing through the waters of the Jamaica area, and that's what relevance it has to the plot, is that okay, now all of a sudden we know that this treasure ship is coming through and the governor wants a piece of it, and so he goes and hires Charles Hunter to be the privateer that will take it down. He's got to put together his motley crew. There's Don Diego, the explosives expert. There's Sanson, the French tricky, backstabbing, throat slitter, sneaky guy because he's French, and A woman named Lazu, who's got this ability to see things through the water that nobody else can, and a gigantic buff Moor guy who had his tongue cut out in a prison somewhere, and his name is Bassa, and he's awesome. And they go out and they have to deal with the Spanish Navy and storms on the sea and violent natives on isolated islands, and even a kraken at one point. It's stuff that has become like the typical staples of pirate novels. It's part and parcel for the genre, but Crichton does what he can to make it all realistic and authentic and convincing. So even though you would see some overlap between elements in that book and elements in the Pirates of the Caribbean movies, his would be a more historically approachable take. That said, I've got an appreciation for workmanlike prose, but when you're writing action, you need to give me more than this guy did this, and then he ran around and did this, and then this happened, and then the fight was over. There's a sword fight between Captain Hunter and the main villain who's a Spanish naval officer named Cazalla. And this, I read the book in print. I've got a hardcover of it, and then I reread it in audiobook a few years later. And it's spelled Cazalla. The audiobook narrator just said Cazalla. And that was like an ice pick to the ears every time I heard it. I do mean to be that guy. The proper pronunciation of that name is Cazalla. So that sucked. And then the showdown between Hunter and Cazalla happens probably before the halfway point of the book. It's over in like 2 paragraphs, and Hunter wins. Cazalla dies. And now we got to go on and do other stuff. The way that the book was pitched and set up, it was like, oh, it was going to be this long, protracted, epic rivalry between Hunter and Cazalla. It's like, nope, he kills this guy, and then he goes on to the next problem. It really felt like Crichton just did a lot of research into the era and the location, and he wanted to show Captain Hunter hopscotching between, okay, if he was on this island, he'd run into this. If he was in these waters, he would run into that. And if he came across a Spanish ship of war, this would happen. And there was this kind of sea monster in the water, and it might do this. And then this is what the betrayal would look like back at Port Royal, and yada, yada, yada. It's a tight 300 pages. It moves at a good clip. And I love well-paced books, but you can't be so well-paced that you skip through the best parts and rush it and do it poorly. And as much as I've been a sweeper for Michael Crichton over the years, I wanted this book to be better than it was. Nevertheless, it had value at being a close to authentic depiction of the time period and the location. If you decide to read it, I will not spoil the ending. Suffice it to say that obviously, like, this book is heavy on the violent content, and there's a fair bit of sexual content in there. I cannot remember the name of the young woman who told Governor Almont that the Spanish galleon was coming through. I want to say that her name was something like Alice. And she's got a role to play like in the beginning and the end of the book. And one of those roles is that she's got to delay and distract an evil, bad Frenchman by stripping down to her birthday suit and letting him do the mattress dance, and she's got to like be really, really loud to distract him while other people are sneaking around the ship. And it's like, okay, we understand what's going on here. Like, we could be less detailed in the gross 17th century personal hygiene products of the book, and be a little bit more detailed in the like cool sword fight between the main hero and the main bad guy part of the book. But it does have that value as a depiction of the time and place, as I have said. Other content warnings, I don't remember there being a whole lot of profanity. This book works as a decent enough treatment of what would make a really good film, especially if Spielberg were to direct it, as he directed a lot of adaptations of Crichton's work. There was, at one point, as was often the case with Crichton's books, the plan for a film adaptation, but so far it hasn't happened. It's most likely not going to happen at this rate. There is supposedly an adaptation of his book Eruption in the early developmental stages. I reviewed that last summer. It's the book that James Patterson finished, and I thought it was fine. I'd give that one 3 stars too, probably. It's the kind of natural disaster type story that we used to get a lot of in the 90s. Dante's Peak, volcano, twister, earthquake, backdraft. I'm going back to the 80s now. And it was made all the more intriguing by a second factor that compounded the problem. And if they do get that one off the ground, it'll make a good disaster flick. I think you guys will like it. But for now, I can still give an endorsement to Pirate Latitudes. I just can't give it like the super ringing endorsement that I would have given to a better pirate book like On Stranger Tides by Tim Powers, which sort of served as the inspiration for the movie, the fourth Pirates movie. But that's a story for another video. I've touched on it before. The video that I made of it was not very good. I'll have to do a better one for you guys. But that's pretty much it. I think you should check out Pirate Latitudes with the aviso of the content. And let me know what you think. Until next time, drive safe. See you out there.